Good morning, good afternoon, and good day, all. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download, which is the
Longest
longest
running.
running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live, now globally syndicated on the IBGN Internet Radio Network. Thank you, gentlemen. Today, we're talking about developing mental toughness through the 4 C's. We have a special guest, Doug Straharchik, to help us with the discussion. CEO and author, his career spans over 80 different countries, and Doug stands at the forefront of mental toughness and resilience research. But before we bring Doug on, let's go around and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us? We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience. Audience participation is highly encouraged. So with that, introductions. Alex, would you kick us off, please?
Hello, everyone. My name's Alex Abbott. I'm the founder of Sapiro. I'm also known as the bearded sales guy. And you find me on pretty much any social media. Woo. And,
Excellent.
One more thing, Rob. I am a proud partner of DLA Ignite.
There we go. Thank you for that, Alex. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Rob. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite. And I must say, Alex, that there was a little bit of disconnect between your video and audio. So you did look like a poorly dubbed martial arts movie from the 1970s, which I thought was quite entertaining. And I'm proud that you're a proud partner of ours.
Yes. Can you replay the Bruce Lee clip? Was it a famous Bruce Lee clip? You want to fight? Fight
No.
me.
This makes for great radio, guys.
It does rather, doesn't it?
Thank you,
dear.
Adam.
It's
Tim.
just tea in here, I promise.
Hello, everybody. My name's Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'm famous for writing the book "Social Selling Techniques for Influence Buyers and Changemakers." I've also read Doug's book,
Developing Mental Toughness. Awesome.
"Developing Mental Toughness: Strategies to Improve Performance, Resilience, and Well-Being in Individuals and Organizations." Available from where you get your books from.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Tim. And myself, I am Rob Durant. I am founder of Flywheel Results. I, too, am a proud DLA Ignite partner, and I'm not famous for writing any books.
Yet.
All right. So, as I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Doug Straharchik. With a wealth of experience from various sectors, including education, health, and sports, his approach of emphasizing evidence-based models and accessible psychometric tools promises to offer profound insights into how we think and how we act. Let's bring him on.
Hooray!
Welcome. Doug, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got here.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction and a warm welcome. I'm really looking forward to this with trepidation. So I'm going to need every ounce of mental toughness.
So, Doug, how did Rob do with the pronunciation of your name?
Perfect, absolutely perfect. He could be Polish. Yeah.
I could be, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yes. So that corner of the States got a lot of Poles. So, right. I'm Doug Straharchik. I'm the CEO of AQR International, which we founded 35 years ago. So in our sector, that's quite a long-lived organization. And the thing that makes me a little bit different from everybody else is for the last 30 years, I, together with some academic colleagues, have been exploring this idea of mental toughness. And it is genuinely groundbreaking. It is genuinely shifting our understanding of what makes people tick, how they respond to things. And very much is beginning to challenge a lot of conventional thinking out there as well. The most important thing is it's beginning to enable people who are involved in people and organization development to treat people as individuals, not as a type, not as a color, not as a group, but as an individual. And that's the holy grail of development. So that's essentially what I'm about. So yes, part of the introduction was we are very heavily evidence-based. So unlike a lot of organizations in our market, the mental toughness concept we're going to talk about has more than 250 independent peer-reviewed pieces of research supporting it from universities all over the world. So we put what we do out there and we allow people to test it, and we work with that. So that's me.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a comment from the audience. Jim McLeod says, this sounds like it's going to be a great episode. And I agree with that sentiment.
Thanks, Jim. Doug, can I ask you a question? Because you talk about mental toughness. Surely we have all this sorted with Myers-Briggs. And we, most of us in leadership have done Myers-Briggs. We probably know what our Myers-Briggs type is. That's it. It's done, isn't it? Done and dusted.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'll try to do this without any expletives. Okay, so when we talk about understanding people, really we're talking about understanding their personality. To put the Myers-Briggs concept into perspective, it's an idea that was developed in the early part of the 20th century, and the Myers-Briggs concept really came out around about 1950. At its time, it was really interesting and innovative. Our understanding of what makes people tick has gone way, way beyond that. To me, it's like saying, well, in 1950, the most popular car you could buy was a Ford Popular. That was the most popular car around the world. Hands up the number of people who are driving a Ford Popular now. Surely you're driving something much more up to date.
For the radio, no one's putting their hands up.
Sorry?
For the internet radio people, no one's putting their hands up. Okay.
Well, I'm playing safe, Tim. Just in case there is a Ford Popular fan out there. So, and the other thing is that most of the personality models, and there are some good personality models out there, focus on behavioral aspects of personality. And the reason why that's sort of been the most popular approach is we can see behavior. If you're an introvert, we can see that you're an introvert. If you're an extrovert, you can see that you're an extrovert. But behavior isn't the whole the whole thing when it comes to personality. Behavior is describing how we act when something happens. But actually, you don't have to be a genius to work this out. Where does our action come from? It has to come from somewhere. So what we do understand now is that how we act is significantly influenced by how we think. Now, mental toughness is an aspect of personality. It is a personality trait which describes how we respond mentally when things happen, whether it's a stressor or a pressure or an opportunity or a challenge. Our initial mental responses will influence both our emotional responses and our behavioral responses. So it's fundamentally more important. It's a bit like, everybody talks about the fight and flight syndrome, the cave dweller who comes across a saber-toothed tiger, or two of them walking through the savannah come across a saber-toothed tiger. One runs and one stops to fight. Well, why? So these are two aspects of behavior, but they could be absolutely equal in every respect in terms of the physical capability, everything. But one behaves in one way, one behaves in another. The thing that differentiates them and makes that difference is their mental approach. So one thinks they can take the tiger on, and the other one thinks they can run faster than a tiger. So It's our mental approaches are critically important.
I think
And
we can safely say that they're both wrong.
Sorry?
I said I think we can safely say that they're both wrong with regards to the saber-toothed tiger. But your point about it's kind of the mental resilience, and it's how that drives your emotion and your behavior. Your response, your intellectual response to the challenges and the things that are presented to you as you travel through life. Now, is that something that one can improve, change, refocus, and reshape if one is aware that some of these challenges are adversely affecting our ability to do what it is we need to do, whatever that may be?
Well, you mentioned something that is critically important, is if you are aware. So when we talk, unlike, again, a lot of concepts, a lot of concepts like to put you in a box, the old typing instruments saying this is who you are and this is what how you're going to respond. It's self-awareness that matters. And of course, the challenge here is that your mental responses are invisible. So the reason why we've developed the concept and the associated psychometric measure is to help people to become self-aware. And so if you're self-aware, that actually gives you options. So again, you don't have to change. If you think that your mental responses are producing outcomes that don't work for you, then it's perfectly legitimate for you to think, well, maybe I should change. And if you want to, well, we know you can change. It might take a lot of time because we're talking about personality, and you have evolved your personality over, I don't know how many years you've lived, 30, 40 or 50 years. So you're not going to change it overnight, but you can change it. But the other thing is, and this is really important, is you don't have to change. Once I understand something about my responses, I can also develop coping strategies. I might like being who I am. I might like occasionally having a shaky moment, but I want to deal with some situations better. So I don't have to change. And that's the thing, there's too much black and white thinking in people development. If you're not this type of person, you should be that sort of person. And so a lot of people misinterpret mental toughness as you've got to be more mentally tough and everybody should be more mentally tough. Well, it's an advantage for some, but you don't have to be more mentally tough. And there are actual advantages to being more mentally sensitive, which is the other end of the spectrum. So that's kind of a slightly oblique answer to your question, but self-awareness is the key.
Is the key, yeah.
We have a comment from Brett Snodgrass coming through from X. I think this is our first comment from X.
I think it's the first comment in 3 years from X, isn't it?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. He says an analogy might be good moral character, which Aristotle describes as intrinsic.
Absolutely. Perfect. Yeah. Yes. You're a fellow disciple. We often talk about this concept being the oldest new idea you'll ever come across, because the first written reference to a concept that is almost identical was by Plato. And Plato described fortitude as one of the 4 virtues. And when you look at what Plato describes as fortitude, it is almost identical to what we call mental toughness now. We just updated the name. And in fact, we didn't update the name. The name was given to the concept by an American, funnily enough.
An interesting thing that you said, so for the viewers and listeners that we have, perhaps obviously, we were all kind of together before we started to broadcast. And you were talking about imposter syndrome. You can address that title a little bit later. But one of the things you said was that I think 70% of people have had that response to situations on occasion. So actually, it's not an issue. It's just part of being human. And I think that one of the things that the modern world has given us is it has given us a series of labels that apply to things that are basic human behavior. And I liken this to clearly, and there are degrees of this. There's people that are genuinely anxious in social situations, but there are people that are anxious in a social situation such as, I've gone to a networking event with 100 people and I don't know any of them and I'm a bit nervous. Well, that doesn't mean that you're socially anxious. That means that you're self-aware and human, because that's how you should be in that environment. And what other instances of that do you come up against, where people are having a natural response and they see this as some hideous failing or weakness in themselves because they're not framing it as a normal reaction to that situation?
Well, that's a really good example. So we can talk about imposter syndrome later. The example that I find most interesting, so it's answering your question in a slightly different way, is when people talk about burnout. But the most popular description of burnout is you've worked too hard. You just kept going at something, and because you've run out of every kind of energy you got, you've toppled over and you didn't see it coming. That's burnout. That's a description of one type of burnout. And what you get to see, and I really made my blood boil this morning. I saw on LinkedIn somebody quite well known posting something about the 5 tips to cure burnout. It was nonsense. It was utter rubbish. Within the mental toughness framework and within the mental toughness concept, there's a scale which is called life control. It's where your sense of self-worth sits. It's what Henry Ford meant when he was talking about, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you're probably right. So some of us, when we're given something to do, will just go out and do it. And we just believe we can do it, and we just set off straight away without thinking too much about it. We go for it. So if that sort of person doesn't realize that maybe what they're trying to do is slightly beyond them, they will burn out because they've overworked. The other end of the scale, you've got people who are hesitant, who can be, your phrase, anxious. They can be nervous. And you could say to them, look, I've got a job for you next week, and I want you to have a go. And that person between now and next Monday will worry. And what they're doing is they're using up their emotional and mental energy. And they get to Monday to start work. They don't get very far. They only do a few simple things and they topple over. They're not toppling over because they've worked too hard. They're toppling over because they've used up their energy in a different way. And it's no point saying to them the same thing that you would say to, person A, who's toppled over because he works too hard. Typically, what you say to that person is, go and take a break. Go and take a couple of weeks on a nice beach. Don't think about work. Recharge your batteries. If you say to the anxious, nervous individual, go and sit on a beach for 2 weeks, what do you think that person's going to do on that beach? They're going to chill out.
Exactly the same thing that they did before they started the new task.
And conversely, if you say that person actually needs support, that person might need a buddy, might need somebody that talks to them every now and again, somebody that helps them to find their path through their work. If you offer that support to the gung-ho type, what do you think that person's going to do? So, because we can glibly look at big topics and say, oh, it must be this. It isn't this. You've got to dig deep and you've got to say, why did this person, this is what I meant about individualization earlier, why did this person respond to a situation? If we can understand why that person responds, we can do something that suits that person, not everybody. And the consequence of that is you could introduce interventions and development activity that harm. And there is now evidence for that, because in March 2023, researchers at Oxford University did something called a meta-study. They looked at 143 well-being and resilience programs in British organisations. And if it's a live audience, I'd be saying, and what proportion do you think of those programs worked? Not one worked. Okay? Now, they're not saying that those programs can't work. What they also found was that some of those programs did more harm than good. So, I've just illustrated that. If you misdiagnose why somebody's burnt out, you can actually introduce the wrong intervention and make things worse.
So if you want to make a difference, clearly what you don't want is a well-intentioned but potentially damaging intervention. So how does one frame this in a way that you can actually provide the support that people need?
Well, I mean, what we say and what the Oxford study said is what's needed is personalization, because what they found in that work and what we find is people do provide individualized solutions. So if you worked for me and you were getting a bit flaky, I might say to you, I can see you're having a bit of a tough time. I'm going to ask you to go and see a coach. I'll hire a coach for you. Or there's a program over here that helps people who are struggling a bit. I'm going to enroll you on that program. That's a nice thing to do. But if I haven't sat down and worked out with you exactly what's going on, I might be sending you on the wrong program. And moreover, if we do send you on a program and we haven't told the deliverer of the program that this is what we want you to work on, that person is just going to adopt what is known as a one-size-fits-all approach. And in fact, that study said that the big problem was the one-size-fits-all approach. And what we're trying to do is say, actually, people are individuals. And within the mental toughness framework, there are 8 components of mental toughness. And that gives rise to 40,000 combinations of profile. So you could literally have 40,000 people in a room, put a challenge up, and you'd get 40,000 slightly different responses. But traditionally, in our world of people and organizational development, we'll say, I know, here's a performance improvement course. You can all go on a performance improvement course. Rubbish.
We have some comments from the audience I wanted to make sure we get to. First, Andrew Slesser says, good morning, good afternoon, all. So we wave, and Andrew's waving back. But he does go on to say, taking someone out of their natural environment, there shall always be a moment of anxiety. It's how it manifests from there is how we deal in that situation. And then one other comment. Tim, would you read this one, please?
Yes, this is a lovely comment. There are moments when we find ourselves lost in a sea of emotions.
I'm sorry, Tim. Who made this comment?
Rakina.
Okay.
There are moments when we find ourselves lost in a sea of emotions, uncertain of what we're feeling or how to cope. Today I'm grappling with a sudden unexplained low mood. Having exited an abusive relationship in November 2021, I've observed a shift in myself. The impact of that environment cost me some of my positive qualities, confidence, the drive to win, an innate motivation to keep moving. I find myself at times feeling unproductive and drained. The question arises, is it possible for me to rediscover the energy and vibrancy I once possessed? What a lovely
Hell yes.
Yeah.
The answer is going to be yes from all of us, I think.
Yeah.
And again, I would say I can recognize some of those elements that you've just described because they figure in the mental toughness framework. And so again, if we understood exactly which bit of your mental approach has been, I'll use inverted commas, damaged by your experience, then once we know what it is, we can repair it, or we can start putting in processes to do something about it. But if we're going to just blindly say, oh, here is another damaged person, here's a solution that worked for the last one, that's just a matter of luck if it works or not.
Doug, there's a really important bit there. So you're saying there could be a whole range of different things that was the specific cause that can be fixed. And are the answers in the book that you've written, or are they?
No, the answers will be in the book, and it's, although it's fairly current, it's 2021. We already know more than we have in the book. So I'll give you an example. One of the components of mental toughness is risk orientation. One's anxiety control, and that isn't about the extent to which you control your anxieties, your emotions. What we do know is that some of us, we've learned over our lives to be able to manage our emotional responses. It means we feel emotions, like anybody else. But instead of allowing our emotions to run us, we are able to channel our emotions to a productive end, sometimes use it. You know, in sport, you often see people saying, right, I'm going to channel my anger to work even harder, to be more aggressive and whatever. But others will often allow, the more mentally sensitive will allow their emotions to dictate their responses. Now, mental toughness, we know from all the research, is about 50-50 genetic and 50% experiential. In other words, you've learnt that a significant amount of your ability to respond to your emotions. The experiences that this individual have gone through, I don't know the individual, so I haven't explored it, but I'm hypothesizing here. Those experiences could easily have created the mindset that that person now has. But if we don't understand which bit of her mindset has been impacted and to what extent, we really are flying blind in trying to do something about it. And what I'm saying now is you can do that. You can actually do a much better job of identifying what that individual's needs are and then directing interventions. So the answer is you can do something about it.
Excellent. Another comment, some great comments from the audience today. Thank you. Keep them coming. Sharifa Rodha Ismail. I apologize. I know I butchered your name, but I tried. She asks, how practical is individualization in a huge setup in a distributed geography?
Well, you said at the beginning, we work in 80 countries. We work with some of the biggest companies in the world and some of the smallest companies in the world. If they're minded to do it, they will do it. It's not that complex a process to get to know the characteristics of your staff better. It doesn't mean that the chief executive has to know, you know, he's got 20,000 staff, has to know the characteristics of all 20,000. But the chief executive has to create a culture where it's important for people at different levels, you know, different managerial levels, to understand the resource they've got in that sort of way. It's perfectly possible. It's perfect. I mean, to put it another way, are managers and supervisors making judgments about people all the time? Absolutely. And they're making crude judgments without being able to see into people's heads. So what we're saying is, here's a way of understanding people better. Here's a way of assessing people better. And because of that, you're going to get better results. We work with some very big organizations that take the time and trouble to do that, and they get a big payback from doing that.
Nice.
But
I
understand the question, because we get it a lot. People say, oh, I can't assess everybody in the organization. You can. There's nothing to stop you doing it. That's, again, it's, I think I can. If I think I can, I can. If I think I can't, I won't.
I can't help but think back.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Alex.
Rob. Yeah. Sorry. I can't help, Doug, but think back, listening to you talk, think back to the times when I've been in a company and they've done the Myers-Briggs or the DISC analysis, and you sort of put into these buckets, and it's positioned as something that's going to help you as an individual, but you can't help but think they're trying to better understand me, and this may not be a good exercise for me to do. But then I was left kind of wondering, well, okay, so if I'm this type of person, but I'm in a sales role, shouldn't I be this type of person really? So I need to start behaving differently. And isn't there a danger that those types of programs do that to people, and it has a negative effect?
Absolutely. And that's about the two instruments you've described. I could have another discussion about how good they are, but they're actually both something called ipsative measures. So when you complete them, they're only asking you for your opinion about yourself. So they're not benchmarks. So you can come out with a view. And when I've completed them, I often think the result I get is I'm introverted. When I complete normative measures, which is comparing me against everybody else on the planet, which is what the mental toughness questionnaire does, I always come out as extrovert, more extrovert than average. So your own perceptions of yourself, they're quite useful, but they're not accurate. And so to be able to use the output from those sort of measures, you've really got to have a long discussion with somebody to try and get to the answer that you'd have come to quickly with a better approach. And you're absolutely right. The idea of typing is very counterproductive, because the thing that we know, Tim knows that we do a lot of work with the Institute of Sales Professionals in the UK. Well, the thing we know is you can be mentally sensitive and you can be incredibly successful as a salesperson, provided you are self-aware about where your kind of potential weaknesses are. You can be mentally tough and really struggle as a salesperson because, again, it's a lack of self-awareness. More mentally tough individuals will often think they can do it all, and they can't. They often think that because that explains something to you, you're going to buy. Logic's on my side. That's not the way sales works. So again, it's about understanding the individual. This tendency to put people into boxes, whether it's a 4-letter combination or a color or whatever, is incredibly counterproductive.
I guess it's also, it assumes that everybody is the same. Some people are fairly simple and some people are very complex, and it makes no allowance for that, does it? No allowance for the fact that your particular preferences are very different to Tim's, even though you're both happy talking to rooms full of people. You're different people.
The only thing I would add to that is almost everybody is complex, and it's that complexity and the differences that matter. But we've got 8 billion people on the planet. They're not in 16 boxes. There's not 500 million of each type. You wouldn't. You must have gone into rooms where there's lots and lots of people, and you've looked around and thought, "Well, I'm one of these. Can I see another one of these?"
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
So just back to Sharifa's point quickly. I don't think the question is how practical is it. There is no. I mean, there is no question. It needs to be done if you want to grow the organization, because it's so valuable to treat people as individuals. In this context. Yeah.
And then Jan Compton says, to Alex's point, I give my profile, the full document, to my colleagues. I tell them it's a manual on how to get the best from me. If they know my natural preference and they're minded to, they can get more from me.
Absolutely. And that's the other big application, because we often talk about, diversity and inclusion. We talk about biases, but we really 90% of the time talk about gender and skin color. There's actually a more fundamentally important aspect of diversity and inclusion is you don't think the same way that I do. And that's very hard to identify, very hard to label. And in matters when you've got people working together, you've got things like, my little example before about somebody who's got a high level of get up and go and somebody who's got a comparatively low level of get up and go. Both matter. The fact that you've got a high level of get up and go can be an advantage in some situations. I need to get something started. This person will do it. I'm now looking for a cure for cancer. I don't want that person to rush out the door and come back in 2 days later with what he thinks is the answer. I want somebody to be more thoughtful, more slow, to question themselves, to doubt themselves a little bit, so that they go out and approach that properly. The reality is we need both almost all of the time. But the problem is, because we recognize that somebody isn't responding to things in the same way as me, doesn't think like me, we will typically reject each other instead of collaborating with each other. And it works both ways. The get up and go guy thinks, what a wuss, this person. He's not keeping up with me. And the wuss is thinking, well, he's obnoxious. He's out the door already. He's not waiting for me. And it's that understanding. It's not just self-awareness. As that quote said, it's also understanding, me understanding other people. and understanding each other to try and optimize the way we work. I don't want you to be my best friend, but I want to spend the next 8 hours doing something productive, valuable. Somebody spoke about intrinsic motivation before. That's one of the components of intrinsic motivation, that I want to do something that's worthwhile. If you ask me to do something that's worthwhile, I'll do it willingly and enthusiastically. I'm not even going to ask about money,
So, Doug, getting back to even just the title of this show, this episode, what is meant by the 4 C's model of mental toughness?
Okay, so the 4 big components are control, and that's assessing. These are all mental responses, the extent to which I feel in sufficient control of myself, my life, and my circumstances to be able to achieve what I want. That's not a new idea. That's a long established idea. Yeah. And
I'm just holding the book up with a diagram in, so for those that are
great for radio, right?
And we've known for a long time that the more that you feel in control, the less stress you get. The less you feel in control, the more stressed you get. So that's kind of an issue in that sort of area. The second C is commitment. And this is assessing the extent to which I have a sense of purpose and I want to do something about it. And that's got 2 elements to it. One is having that sense of purpose. That's about being able to visualize what you need to do and think about it being worthwhile. This notion of having a worthwhile goal is really important. Some of us can do it, and surprisingly, an equivalent number of people can't think in that sort of way. And you'd think that if you had a sense of purpose, you'd go out and do it. That's not the case. What we tend to find is that at least a proportion of people who know what they should be doing then don't go out to do it because they can't be bothered to make the effort. And you see that in workplace, you see that in education, you see that everywhere. So those 2 components, control and commitment, broadly describe resilience. So resilience is a quality that enables you to recover from an adverse situation. And you can recover from an adverse situation because you feel in sufficient control to be able to do something about it, and you still remain committed to doing something about it. Now, an American researcher called Cabasa was doing some work in California with chief executives, I believe, in IT companies. And she had this belief that the higher up the organization you went, the more resilient you were. And she found that, but she also found something else. Not only were they more resilient, in other words, they could deal with adversity and things that had happened in the past. These are people who deliberately put themselves into situations where there was a risk of adversity. So she called that challenge. These people were now optimistic. They were positive. These are people who said, well, I know I can deal with what's gone wrong in the past. I don't know what's coming up in the future, but I'm going to go for it because I think opportunity lies there. Now, some people, not everyone thinks like that. Some people will say, oh my God, I don't know what's out there in the future. I'm going to hold back. It might be not good news. It might be threatening. So again, there's a spectrum of people. And what we found was that the 4th C was challenge, and that consists of 2 elements. One is risk orientation, and that's the extent to which I'm prepared to try new things, new ideas, push myself into the unknown. And we had a question about that earlier. And the other component is learning orientation. And for me, that's the beating heart of the whole concept. Because what we found is, as we go through life, things happen to us and around us. Some of us are really good at looking at what's happened to us and around us and learning from that. And the driver for us is we want to get it right next time. We want to be better. An equivalent number of people are not good at this. Basically, when something happens and it's unpleasant, they would rather sweep it under the carpet. And the consequence of that is next time it happens, you repeat your mistake and you go through the whole mill again. And then the final component, the final C, is confidence. And that's about your self-belief in your abilities, self-belief in your abilities to deal with whatever life and work throws at you. So again, that's a mental thing, because it's not about the level of abilities. You can actually be one of the most able people on the planet, but you can still doubt yourself. And we see this in the world of education with kids. You know, they're really knowledgeable. They've soaked up everything that the teacher has thrown at them. Put them into an exam and say, here's a question, you know the answer to that. And they go, I don't know that I do. And they don't put it down. You see that in business, you see in the workplace. People who are perfectly competent will hold themselves back because they think, well, do I really know enough? Doesn't so-and-so know more than me? And then the final little bit is something that you've all referred to in the past, is interpersonal confidence. And that's about having the mentality to feel you can engage with people around you. So some of us can do it. So we walked into a room of 100 strangers. Some of us will walk freely up to somebody, say, hi, how are you doing? Why are you here? This is me. And you're suddenly into an engagement. Others will walk around the edge of a room and wait for somebody to approach them. And if nobody ever does, they don't have any engagement. So those are the elements of mental toughness. And you can see that there are 8 different big components to it. The 4 C's are kind of very big components. Above that is this understanding that mental toughness is a combination of resilience and positivity and optimism. So resilience is backward looking. Can I deal with what's happened in the past? And one of those questions kind of touched upon that. And positivity is, can I deal with what's coming up in the future, even though I don't know what it is yet? So that's about positivity, optimism, and hope. Those 2 together enable us to thrive. Now, resilience allows us to survive, but we can get worn out just trying to survive. Bringing the 2 together enables us to thrive. So that's a rather long response to a very short question.
Love it.
That was great, Doug.
Yeah.
So, how do the 4 C's vary in different cultures or industries or settings or domains?
Yeah, we do a lot of work. I mean, there's me, I'm a practitioner. People often think I'm an academic because I kind of can talk about the academic aspects of it, but I actually work with a lot of very clever academics, and there are now 2 professors who've become professors because of the work with mental toughness. And so we constantly supply them with information, with data to examine these things. So one of the most important ones is, one of the most important questions we get asked is that there a difference between males and females? And generally the answer is males and females in terms of the mental toughness are virtually identical. Statistically, they're identical. And that's quite an important message. I mean, we've got a male-dominated panel here, but if there's no difference in the mental toughness between males and females, there are no grounds for discriminating between males and females. There's no grounds for believing females are more tender in some way than males, which is used to be a widely held belief. And so the idea that you prevent a female from doing something for any of these reasons just doesn't hold water. Males and females are virtually identical. In terms of culture, you said at the beginning, we work in 80 countries. Virtually every country we go to, we go and do what's called an equivalency study. We check to see whether the questionnaire and the concept still holds water in that culture. The answer is, wherever you go, the overall level of mental toughness is virtually identical. But when I talk about those 8 factors, there are differences in patterns of those 8 factors. And what this is telling us is that wherever you go, people generally have worked out how to survive and to a degree thrive in their own way. But there are cultural implications that have meant that they will do it in different ways. So I'll give you a little example. In the West, in Western, well, actually globally, the average score on a 1 to 10 scale for, say, commitment, the commitment element, is 5.5. It's actually the average score for all of the scales. So in the West, anywhere we go in Europe, Canada, the States, we find on commitment, the average score is 5.5. We do a lot of work in China. On that scale, the average score comes out at just over 7. Now, statistically, a psychometrician would say a difference of half a STEM from 5.5 to 6 would be significant. That's 1.5 STEMs. So it's very significant. And when you go to China, and I've been there, of course, hopefully some of you have as well, you will find that if you go to work with a group of Chinese people and they make a promise, they say, right, I'm going to do this overnight, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, you'll have it on your desk. It's always on your desk. It's part of their culture. It's part of their, it's face saving. If they don't do that, they are mortified. If you go to the Middle East, you get a completely different response. The average score in the Middle East comes out about 4.6, 4.7. And what we find there is their approach to time is different. And it's affected partly by their religion and partly by their environment. For them to do something by 9 o'clock, yeah, it was useful and it was a target. But if I don't land it on your desk at 9 o'clock, who died? So they have a completely different approach. And one of the reasons why we're doing some work globally is a lot of these international organizations keep coming across this. You know, you get a branch in China dealing with a branch in, say, the United Arab Emirates, and they're tearing their hair out because they don't keep their promises to each other. Or one's keeping a promise and the other one isn't, that sort of thing. So there are those kind of differences emerging. And that's part of what we want to do. We want to learn more and more about it. We want to take our understanding of people and how to get people to be the best version of themselves that they can be. We want to get it to a level where we really understand it, way past sort of the superficial Myers-Briggs type understanding. We want to
Doug,
get...
you're using those numbers, those measures. What can you just tell me? I may have missed it. What are those measures again? What do they represent?
Right. So one of the important byproducts of all the work we did was we were able to develop a questionnaire, and that was fundamentally important because, you know, we can describe the concept, but if I sat and looked at you, Alex, how do I know how strong you were on each of these 8 factors? So one of the challenges the academics responded to is to develop a questionnaire that would give us a better insight. Psychometric measures are very valuable, but they're not perfect things. They give you a better picture of individuals, not a perfect picture, but it's a big advance from what we got. So now we have a psychometric measure, which is called the MTQ Plus, which is, in terms of, you know, its quality, it's up there. It's one of the Rolls-Royce of measures. It is a very high quality measure, but it gives us this capability to assess people on each of the 8 components. And as I said before, it's normative. And so what we're able to do is to get Alex to complete the questionnaire and compare your results to the average person on the planet. Because that's what we really want to know. Is Alex more or less mentally tough than the average person? And to what extent? Because once we've kind of benchmarked in that way, we can get a better grasp of who Alex is and how to work with him.
And do you find a difference between how they answer the questionnaire versus how they actually behave in situations?
Right. Okay. So there is a technical answer to that. The statisticians will identify things like reliability and validity. So they will go out and test the questionnaire, and the reliability and validity of the mental toughness questionnaire is very high. So typically, this might not sound like a lot, typically we find we get a really good close answer that the individual accepts more than 50% of the time. And when you get above that level, you get in different degrees of fit, and very occasionally you'll get people who say, no, this isn't me. Okay. And in some cases they're right. Yeah. But again, we're trying not to pigeonhole people. We're not trying to say you completed this questionnaire, so you must be this. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Yeah. And for anyone that might be curious that's listening, is this questionnaire publicly available? Can anyone go and test?
Anyone can do it. I mean, there is a cost to it, obviously, It's not a big cost
Right.
compared to all the other high quality measures. If they go to our website, it's aqr.co.uk, they'll learn about it. So we get lots and lots of coaches, for instance, using it in their work. We get training and development organisations using it in their work, and we get, as we said before, some pretty big organisations realising that if they understand their people better, they can get a better response, and not only that, they can develop better well-being.
Doug, we've got 5 minutes left. Imposter syndrome.
Right.
Can we talk about it?
We can, yes.
Because we've done just about everything else. We've done burnout. We've done. Let's do imposter syndrome.
Right. So
in 5 minutes.
I could just do a little bit of scene setting. In December, The Economist journal, which is a very highly respected journal, did an article about the medicalization of normal everyday events. And what they were actually looking at was, in the UK, it's got the second highest proportion of people who are identified as having mental health issues. Only Sweden is a higher level. And when they looked at it more closely, they found that these people didn't have mental health issues. So what was happening is that there were people who would have a lousy week, go to the doctor would say, oh, you've got mental health problems. And they were then identified as somebody having mental health issues. Well, before we got overexcited about mental health, we would just treat that as you've had a lousy week. The big issue from the Economist's perspective is that all of this was diverting resources from people who genuinely had mental health issues. So that's the thing. But what they're pointing to is this notion of medicalizing things. So the research on imposter syndrome isn't research on imposter syndrome. It's on something called the imposter phenomenon. A research paper never mentions syndrome. Somebody else has turned it into a syndrome. Well, the imposter phenomenon is saying originally it was on females, and the study was to suggest that perhaps females saw themselves as imposters more than males. And subsequently, we found that's not the case. It's equal. And feeling that you're an imposter is simply, I've done something. Was that really down to me? You know, am I really kidding myself? Have I really kidded everybody else? And if you think about it in that way, it's a normal response, right? So the research showed that 70% of the population experience the imposter phenomenon. So somebody has turned it into an imposter syndrome, and now you've got coaches running around saying, I can sort out your imposter syndrome. In the mental toughness context, imposter syndrome can be explained phenomenon can be explained by one of the factors is the confidence and abilities that I spoke about. So if you've got a low level of confidence in your abilities, but you have abilities, then you may well have deployed those abilities, done a great job, but you still go away thinking that wasn't me. Right? That's not, critically medical thing. That is just you. And when I spoke about learning orientation, it's perfectly normal. It's actually desirable for people to say, right, I've done that. I just need to think, was that really me? And to what extent did other people play a part? These are normal responses. These are not me going crazy in some way. Moreover, if I didn't experience aspects of the imposter phenomenon, there's a risk I think it was all down to me. That's arrogance. So what we're getting, I don't know whether I'm allowed to use this phrase, we're getting a lot of bullshit in people.
You've used it, Doug. You've used it.
Whether it's this tendency to medicalize things just to make them dramatic in some way, so I can come along and cure you. Well, I can cure everybody. You haven't got it.
Dan Rockwell says great stuff.
And no laying on the hands, which is now politically incorrect, of course.
Yeah, Dan Rockwell says great stuff to what you were saying, Doug. And Andrew Slesser says it must have been an imposter that turned it into a syndrome.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, very good. Very good.
Rob.
Doug, this has been great. How can people learn more about you?
Okay, so, well, they can find me on LinkedIn, if they can type my name, of course.
So how do you spell your surname, Doug?
Well, it's there. It's Doug Straharczyk, STRYCHARCZYK. Or they can email me. That's it. It's very simple. doug@aqr.co.uk. And then, of course, as Tim's demonstrating, there is a book, Developing Mental Toughness. That's published by Kogan Page. That's available in every good bookshop. And that's got contact details in the book. The book is definitely worth buying. That's in third edition, by the way. That is genuinely a global bestseller.
Excellent.
Nice. Before we wrap up, though, there's loads of different assessments on your website. Which one is it that we've been talking about today? The mental toughness
The
score?
MTQ Plus.
MTQ Plus.
Yeah,
Lovely.
we can talk about some of the others at another time, because at least one of the others is also leading edge.
Excellent.
Great.
I also wanted to thank everyone in the audience for being an active part of today's show. Quick announcement. We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. Scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. Doug, on behalf of the panelists, to our audience, thank you so much for being here. And to everyone in the audience that has joined us, thank you for being an active part of today's show. We will see you next time.